Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're learning a new language, this video is for you. So, let's talk about something super important: how to get better at speaking a new language. But guess what? The trick is, you don't get better at speaking by speaking a lot. Sounds strange, right? Well, let me explain. When you first start learning a new language, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. That's okay, but if you keep making the same mistakes over and over, it becomes a bad habit. And bad habits can be hard to fix later. Listen before you speak. Now, what if I told you that it's better to focus on understanding the language first before you start speaking it? If you do that, by the time you begin talking, you'll already have a good idea of what sounds natural and what doesn't. So, you'll know when something is right and when it's not. So here's the key: you don't get better at speaking just by talking. You get better by listening. That's right, listening is your best tool for speaking better. Let me repeat that: you improve your speaking by listening. Why listening is important? Why? Because the more you listen to the language, the more you can understand it and feel how it works. And guess what? Research shows that the more input you get, meaning the more you listen, the better you will be when you finally speak. So, if you want to speak better, listen more. Listen, and listen some more to things you can understand. This is called comprehensible input, and it's the most important thing for improving your speaking skills. Now, let's talk about how our brains learn languages. There are two main ways. The first is called learning. Learning is when you study grammar rules or vocabulary on purpose. The second way is called acquisition, which is unconscious or subconscious knowledge of the language, which happens naturally when you hear and understand the language without thinking too much. The goal is to focus more on acquisition. This means listening and understanding, like children do when they learn their first language. They don't memorize rules, they listen and pick it up naturally. So, should you focus more on learning or acquisition? Definitely acquisition. You want to feel the language, understand it, and use it without having to think too hard. So, how do we get there? How do we learn a language naturally? Well, everyone knows how to learn. You pick up a book, you study the rules, or maybe you make flashcards. But acquisition is different. It happens when your brain understands the messages being communicated. Let's take an example. Imagine you're learning Spanish. You need to find a way where the language is presented to you in a way that you can understand. For example, if I started speaking in Spanish, here's something you might hear. Cuando empiezas a aprender un idioma, al principio puede ser difícil entender todo. Pero, con el tiempo, las palabras empiezan a tener sentido. Por ejemplo, si escuchas algo como, el zapatero hizo unos zapatos mágicos para el jardín del bosque, puedes comprender la historia aunque no entiendas cada palabra. Understanding without knowing every word. Here is the translation of what I just said for those who don't understand Spanish. When you start learning a language, at first it can be hard to understand everything. But, over time, the words start to make sense. For example, if you hear something like, "The shoemaker made some magical shoes for the forest fairy," you can understand the story even if you don't understand every word. In this example, you didn't need to memorize grammar rules or vocabulary lists. You just listened and understood what I was saying because the message was clear. Even if you didn't catch every single word, your brain started to acquire the language in those few seconds. How the brain learns. What happens is, You take what you already know and use that to help you understand what you don't know. In this case, you understood the meaning of shoemaker and magical shoes and applied that to the rest of the sentence. That's how your brain naturally learns. So, if you're an adult learner asking, where do I start with this acquisition idea? The good news is, there are lots of resources. Especially if you're learning popular languages like English, Spanish, French, Chinese, or German. There are YouTube channels, podcasts, and teachers who talk about this idea of acquiring a language. Finding the right resources. But here's something important. Not all language programs are good. Some focus too much on memorization and not enough on giving you rich, understandable language. What you should look for is a method or materials that you can understand right away, without just relying on translations. Now, translations are fine. They can help, but they shouldn't be your main tool. You want something that gives you the language directly, in a way that you can follow, and slowly builds your understanding over time. The key is to surround yourself with materials in the language you're trying to learn. This way, your brain starts acquiring the language naturally, just like how kids learn their first language. There's an app called Helm. Helm is a powerful app for language learning tools. Whether you're a language learner or just someone who appreciates quality content without the noise, you must check out Helm. It might just help you learn a new language. You get fresh content in your target language, and you can instantly tap to understand anything you don't know. It's literally how our brains are wired to learn languages, through real, interesting content. If you're serious about learning a language, grab Helm and thank me later. Click the link in the description below and subscribe. This helps learners acquire the language naturally, without focusing on rules. It's all about providing meaningful, understandable input in a fun and engaging way. Now, let's talk a little about grammar. When people say grammar, they usually mean the rules of syntax, how words are ordered and sentences are constructed. But here's the thing. Knowing the rules doesn't necessarily mean you can use them effectively when speaking. You can study syntax all you want, but the problem is, will you be able to use it when you need it in real conversations? Even if you memorize the rules perfectly, your brain might not have enough time to apply them in the middle of a conversation. Imagine you're chatting with someone in Spanish, and you stop to think, should I use the present progressive or past progressive here? Is it imperfect or preterite? You'd lose the flow of the conversation. Our brains naturally focus on meaning, not the technical details of the language. This is why trying to memorize grammar rules isn't as helpful as you might think. The brain can't multitask between focusing on meaning and form at the same time. It's either one or the other. When you focus on meaning, grammar naturally starts to fall into place as your brain picks up on the patterns over time. What should you do instead? Focus on listening to comprehensible input, language that you can understand, even if you don't know every word. Your brain will start to acquire the grammar naturally, without needing to think about it. Some people might argue, but I've learned grammar rules, and it seems like I've acquired them over time. While it might feel like that, we believe that conscious learning doesn't directly turn into acquisition. Just because you learned a rule doesn't mean it automatically becomes part of your natural, unconscious use of the language. When it comes to speaking, monitoring your own speech using grammar rules isn't very effective either. Even in writing, where you have more time to think, most people still make mistakes, even if they know the rules. Proofreading is hard because, again, we're focusing on meaning rather than form. That's why, when you review your own work, you might think it's perfect, only to find out later that you missed a bunch of errors. Instead of spending time trying to be a good monitor of your speech, focus on being a good acquirer. Listen to as much language as you can, and let your brain do the work of picking up the grammar naturally. When you listen to someone speaking in a new language, your brain is automatically focusing on the meaning. Over time, with enough exposure to the language, you'll start to acquire the form as well. The grammar, the structure, and the rules will become part of your unconscious knowledge. Remember, when you start learning a language, if you try to speak right away, you're bound to make mistakes. And if you keep repeating those mistakes, they'll become habits that are hard to break later on. But if you focus on listening and understanding first, by the time you start speaking, you'll already have a good sense of what's natural and correct. In short, you don't get better at speaking by speaking more. You get better at speaking by listening more. The best practice for improving your speaking is listening to comprehensible input, over and over again. To become fluent and confident in a new language, focus on listening. Find materials that are engaging, understandable, and fun. The more you listen, the better you'll get at speaking, naturally and effortlessly. Learning a language doesn't have to be stressful or tedious. It's a journey of discovery, filled with stories, culture, and new ways to express yourself. Take it one step at a time, trust the process, and most importantly, enjoy it. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. That progress happens when you immerse yourself in engaging content, stop focusing on memorization, and start focusing on understanding. So, if you're ready to take your language learning to the next level, start today. Pick up a book, download the Helm app, watch a video, or listen to a podcast. Let the language unfold naturally. And before you know it, you'll be speaking with confidence. In conclusion, remember this: it's not just about studying the rules. It's about understanding the language in real situations. So listen a lot, find materials that make sense to you, and trust the process, because acquisition is the secret to becoming truly fluent. Don't worry too much about speaking perfectly right away. Start by listening a lot, understanding what you hear, and letting the language sink in naturally. That way, when you finally speak, you'll sound more natural and confident. Let me recap all that I have said for easy understanding. Listen before you speak. Why listening is important. Why your focus should be on acquisition rather than learning. Why acquisition is subconscious and there is no memorization needed. How the brain learns. Finding the right resources. Why knowing grammar rules doesn't help speak. How conscious grammar knowledge just helps you monitor your speech, which is time-consuming. Why students tend to make the same mistakes over and over again even if they know the rules. Why we acquire vocabulary incidentally and incrementally. Why learners should lower their expectations rather than trying to progress faster. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments how you're going to start using this method in your language learning journey. Watch more language learning tips here.